bring up our first speaker. However, it's a little bit different tonight. I'm not going to introduce our first speaker. I'm going to introduce a person to introduce our first speaker. And her name is Adria Breyer. And she is an international integrative cancer consultant and life coach for individuals and families with or without cancer. She's been in the health arena pretty much her entire adult life and has a dedicated following. You can learn more about her on her website at thrivinghealthandwellness.com. There's no symbols in there, it's all English words, thrivinghealthandwellness.com. So I'd like to invite Adria to come up and introduce our first speaker. Please welcome Adria.
Thanks for not putting an N in my name. It's Adria Breyer. It's great, actually, to look out and see so many familiar faces again. It's been a while since I've been here. And I know that there's an incredible amount of knowledge in this audience. So you are in for an extraordinary treat with Dr. Horner. I had her present last night at the Commonwealth Club, and she knocked everybody's socks off. So just wait for the information. By the way, she has a limited number of books here, and the others can be on Amazon. And that's for the thousands of people who are going to be listening to the podcasts. A little bit about me and why I asked Dr. Horner to come to San Francisco and present. I had the first episode of breast cancer in 2006, and it made no sense to me that traditional medicine wanted me to blow up my body when it was already screaming for help. So I said no. I had nobody to guide me. I didn't even know Dr. Horner at the time. And my oncologist, who was supposedly this incredibly well-respected integrative oncologist, fired me. I actually gave him a letter absolving him of any of my choices because I thought maybe that would get somebody on my team. You need somebody in the traditional establishment for lab work and whatever else you want. And he still would not keep me. And that was another life lesson because when one door closes, another door opens. And I found an extraordinary female oncologist who supports my path and lets me follow my intuition. That led me even further. At the time, I'd been in the health arena for decades, and my learning curve on cancer had to go like this. And I found myself sharing, and so I dropped the regular practice primarily and stayed mostly in the cancer arena. I made it my life's work to bring forward people like Dr. Horner, Mitch Gaynor, Bruce Lipton, Michael Roizen, all of these people to our arena, which reaches a lot of people worldwide through our podcasts, so that they can empower all of you and all of the people out there who are disempowered by the cancer machine. And let me ask another question, right? Who here has not been disempowered either by the cancer machine or knows somebody who's been really negatively affected with cancer? Yeah, right. Okay, so here's another question. How many people have ever had to deal with an insurance company on an issue? And how many people have been frustrated by an insurance company on an issue? Yeah, even when it was approved in the system, right? You could practically crawl into your closet and give up. Well, before I tell you more about Dr. Horner, I want to tell you this because this really moved me. Dr. Horner took 5 years of her life to spearhead the campaign to have, this always just moves me, I'm sorry, to have breast reconstruction covered by insurance nationwide. Now, can you imagine going through cancer, your family, your children, yourself, and having to fight the insurance companies to do the very basic support so that you can possibly get back on track and healthy again? I think you belong in the Doctors Hall of Fame, and if there isn't one, you should start one. That action helped millions of women, and it's going to help millions more women because cancer is unfortunately growing because the information, particularly in the United States, is not clear and forthcoming. So what you're going to hear from Dr. Horner is a lot of information, whether you take 1 step or 4 steps. It's like a pebble in a pond. Get the book, underline it, take a couple of steps this week, take another couple of steps next week. It's not just about cancer. It's about staying healthy because our environment is toxifying us. And the body knows how to heal if you remove what's clogging it up. Her books will help you with that. So now, I've shortened the bio because it's pages long. You all know about Oprah, Dr. Oz, Bernie Siegel. I could name any number of additional doctors who have said that Dr. Horner practically walks on water. So here's the official bio. Nationally known surgeon, best-selling author, professional speaker. Holds 2 board certifications. Sorry, I'm reading this, obviously. National Board of Surgery and National Board of Plastic Surgery. Featured in hundreds of national magazines, radio, and television shows, including Dr. Oz, Mercola.com, interviews, and A Healthy You. In 2000, Oprah, how many people don't admire Oprah, recognized her as part of the Angel Network on her television program. She's the author of 2 award-winning books. Again, she only has a few here. Go on Amazon when she runs out, because she will run out tonight. Competent, intelligent, educated, strong, committed. And I said to her yesterday, it's a little chauvinistic, but you don't expect a doctor who's done all that with all that knowledge to be that gorgeous. So she's broken the glass box on that one. Dr. Horner, it's yours.
So I have a question. How long do I have? How do I want?
I'm just going to take the mic. You've got
Okay.
the microphone.
Yeah, I have a microphone, but I'm just wondering, like, how long do I have to speak?
About
An hour. Okay. All right. Plenty of time. So thank you for that amazing introduction. I feel like I should just like carry you around with me everywhere. So just to give you a little bit more background about myself. So as Adria said, I'm board certified in general surgery and board certified in plastic surgery. And I worked as a plastic surgeon in Cincinnati, Ohio. I now live in beautiful San Diego, but there for about 12 years. And when I started my practice, I really had a special interest in working with breast cancer patients because my mom had been a breast cancer patient. So she was first diagnosed with breast cancer when I was early stages in college. And they caught it early. She had a mastectomy. She did great. No further problems. And then about 13 years later, they found a breast cancer on her opposite side. And as you can imagine, they were checking her frequently since she'd had a history of breast cancer. And so when they caught this particular one, it was, again, small, less than a centimeter. And all the receptors that we look for were favorable, and there wasn't any lymph node metastasis. So we thought, okay, great. You know, she's going to be great, just like she was the last time. So she had her mastectomy done. And then about 5 years after that, she suddenly said, you know what, I think I pulled a muscle in my leg. And I saw her, and I thought, that's not what that is. So she ended up having metastatic breast cancer to her femur. And this is from stage 1 disease. Now, because I had the special interest in breast cancer, I actually got active in the American Cancer Society, and they made me the spokesperson for the American Cancer Society on breast cancer issues for my state. And so they taught me to say, we don't know what causes breast cancer. We have no known cure, so the best thing that women can do are mammograms and breast exams in a hopes of catching it early. Well, that's what my mom did. And when she got metastatic breast cancer, she just gave up and she died 9 months later. And it was like, okay, well, my mom did that, and you know, this outcome wasn't good for her. And then I was looking in my practice and watching my patients becoming younger and younger and younger that I was doing breast reconstruction on for breast cancer. So finally, I end up doing breast reconstruction for breast cancer in women in their 20s. And I thought, okay, something's terribly wrong with this. And if we look at the statistics, you know, here in the United States, the incidence of breast cancer, prostate cancer, colon cancer, very high. If you look in Asia, the incidence is very low. So the question is why is that? You know, if an Asian person moves here to the United States and adopts our American diet and lifestyle, you know, what happens? Well, if their risk doesn't go up very much, we know that it's mostly genetic. If the risk goes up a lot, then we know that it actually has to do with our diet and lifestyle. So guess what? The statistics show that when an Asian person moves here to the United States, adopts our American diet and lifestyle, within 1 generation, their risk matches that of an American woman. So then it's like, okay, what are they doing and what are we doing that's making such a big difference? So 20 years ago, I mean, this is amazing to me because it was 20 years ago, time really flies. I started going through the medical research to see, well, what, if anything, that we know that women can do to help to lower the risk? And I had no idea what I was going to find because I thought all the research was mostly done by pharmaceutical companies, right? However, 20 years ago, I found thousands of studies that show exactly why we have a breast cancer epidemic and prostate cancer and colon cancer and ill health in general. And of course, it all comes down to diet and lifestyle. Now, when I went through medical school and 2 residencies, so I'm like one of the longest trained doctors, I did not have one course in nutrition. And in fact, I didn't learn anything about health, and I can say that for a fact. I did not know how to create health. I learned how to suppress the symptoms of disease using pharmaceutical medications or to cut things out or, to enhance beauty, right? And that was it. So when I started reading about this, there was actually a whole convergence of things, like the universe came in and was like, you're going to be doing something else. This is right after I started my practice, too. So as Adria said, insurance companies suddenly decided that they didn't want to pay for breast reconstruction anymore. And I got a letter, you have to send in a letter and ask permission to do any kind of operative procedure, and I sent a letter in on my 32-year-old patient. They got a response back from the insurance company saying they weren't going to pay for breast reconstruction on my patient because it was on an organ with no function. I went, oh. You just said that to the wrong person. So I was really mad, and I wasn't even registered to vote at the time, so I didn't know anything about the political process, but I learned about it real fast. So long story short, we started in the States because the Clinton health care plan did not go through. So 50 states, we kind of organized all that. We got state laws passed in 35 different states. Then I found a loophole law, so basically nobody's covered by state health care laws. There's so many exemptions for it. So then I was like, okay, I just need to meet President Clinton. So for 2 weeks, every person I met, I said, do you know how I can meet President Clinton? And within 2 weeks, I met someone who knew someone on the Federal Trade Commission, had lunch with him, and 5 days later, I was in Washington, D.C. talking to President Clinton. I also had to pay $10,000 for the ability to talk to President Clinton. So it turns out that that's kind of like how our government works. If you want to talk to a president, that's a minimum fee that you have to pay. But anyway, long story, again, I worked on this for 5 years. We got a bill, and actually Anna Eshoo from this area, who is a representative, so she sponsored my bill in the House. I had Ted Kennedy sponsor it in the Senate. And it ended up kind of through divine intervention getting tacked onto the budget bill because somebody else owed somebody a favor. It was never heard in committee, which is another thing about how our government works. But anyway, it passed. So now it's a federal law that all insurance companies have to pay for breast reconstruction following mastectomy. Now, while I was going through this is when suddenly my mom gets metastatic breast cancer and dies, 9 months later. So for me, it was like, okay, yes, we need to correct this atrocity, but really the problem is that we've got this epidemic, of breast cancer. And, when you're looking over the general population, for me, it's like, well, we just have ill health in general, and it has not gotten better. I mean, when you go out in public, and it's amazing to me what Americans look like, now. The level of obesity is just incredible. I mean, the statistics are that 66% of us are overweight or obese. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And that, of course, increases your risk of all sorts of, different kinds of diseases. So anyway, so what I did then was I actually had a reporter that came out to interview me after I met with President Clinton the first time. And he was a teacher of transcendental meditation. And he had taught for about 30 years or so forth. And so he said, you know what, you should really learn transcendental meditation. And I was like, okay, I'll do that. So I learned transcendental meditation and was completely blown away, like instantly, of the effects that it had. And he said, well, if you're interested in that, this comes from a system of medicine called Ayurveda. And I'm kind of embarrassed because at the time I'd never heard of it before. So how many people have heard of Ayurveda? Yay! So Ayurveda is a traditional system of medicine from the area that's now India. It is one of the longest like holistic systems that there is, 5,000 years old. Like traditional Chinese medicine, there's a lot of similarities where it's a very much of a holistic approach. Ayur means life and Veda means knowledge, so it literally means the knowledge of life. Now, how different is that from Western medicine? So the concept in Ayurveda is that everything that we do, every food that we eat, every thought that we think, everything has an influence on us. And it's either taking us into balance or taking us out of balance. When you do things that bring you into balance, what it does is it will enhance your inner healing intelligence. When you do things that take your body out of balance, what it does is to obstruct the flow of that inner healing intelligence, and it can't keep you well anymore. So all the different techniques that are involved in Ayurveda are all designed to bring your body into balance. So one of the concepts in Ayurveda, too, is that we're not all the same. Now, in Western medicine, they have a tendency to treat us all the same, right? It's all kind of like cookbook. Everybody's given the same drugs. So if you have this, you're going to be given whatever. But Ayurveda recognizes that we're not all the same. And we know this, right? So we have people, like friends of ours, that they can eat anything and they never gain an ounce, right? We hate them. Do we have someone like that in this audience? Can you come up here? Yes, I'm pulling volunteers like laboratory rats out of the audience. That's right. Thank you for volunteering. Then there's people, so, and you can probably, you can skip meals and it's no big deal, right? Yeah, sometimes you forget to eat, right? You have a tendency to worry. Yeah, kind of a light sleeper, maybe. So, let's see, do you talk fast?
No, I talk slow.
You talk slow, okay. So we're blends of different kinds of characteristics. But so the next person I want to pull out of the audience. So is anybody you have to eat your 3 meals a day and they have to be on time, and if you don't eat them, you get grumpy? Who would that be? Somebody who gets a little grumpy, right? But you're really smart, right? Do you get angry? You have a tendency towards getting angry? Yeah, okay, come here. Come here. We'll bring her down here. What is your name?
Lisa.
Lisa, okay. All right, and what is your name?
Mary.
Mary? Okay, all right, so we got Lisa and Mary. Okay, now I need somebody who's, you just don't eat that much, but gosh darn it, you can't lose that weight. And you're pretty darn easygoing. You sleep great. Consider your friends think you're really nice. Oh, come on. Former football players. Okay, well, let me see. Actually, I think it's you. What, one of you, right? Yep, okay, come on. How did I know? Because I can tell by looking. So people think that I'm like a magician, for this one. So in Ayurveda, there's this concept that is not in Western medicine, and it's called the doshas. So the doshas are kind of underlying principles that are present in all living things. So they're called vata, pitta, and kapha. So vata is something that governs movement, and it's quick, and it's kind of dry, and so that's why I'm saying, do you like movement? Do you exercise? Yes. Okay, hard to sit still if you're sitting for a long time, right? Okay. Then you have some pitta. So pitta governs metabolism. So there's a lot of fire and heat present in pittas. So vatas have very light digestions, and they actually can't eat like raw foods. Like if you eat a lot of salads and stuff, it starts to actually not feel very good, right? Pittas can eat rocks, and they're fine.
Probably.
Probably. Now, vatas usually have a tendency towards worry. And they can usually learn things really fast, but they can also forget them really fast too. Now, pittas usually have a more medium build. Vatas are thin, and so pittas are more medium build. They usually have a little bit ruddier complexion. They can do premature graying. They usually have a sharp intellect. But, you know, they have a tendency to get pissed off. Don't cross them. That's right. So, and then the third type is called kapha, and kapha governs structure. So usually, like if you look at your wrists, you can see like vatas usually have a thinner wrist, pittas can be more medium, and a kapha has a little bit, you know, wider. The bone structure is usually a bit more. They have a tendency to hang on to weight. Usually you sleep great, yeah? And sometimes you're not, are you a morning person? No. Are you a morning person?
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh. So usually vatas are morning people. But see, what you can do is you can see all these characteristics and you think, oh, you know, do you ever have problems with indigestion or acid reflux?
Yes.
Uh-huh, okay. And let's see, so do you have problems with congestion sometimes, like coughs and sinus stuff? No. So here's the thing too, is that all of us have some vata, pitta, and kapha in us. And so the proportion that you are is considered your constitution. It's kind of like your blueprint. And so it can come out in all sorts of different ways. So for instance, when I test out, it's like I'm a combination where there's almost no difference between the amount of vata and pitta that I have in my body. So that it comes out in these ways in different combinations. So in somebody else, it could be, you know, completely different, but I'll have both characteristics. So you're not going to be, it's very rare to have somebody who's 100% vata, 100% pitta, and 100% kapha. So, for instance, I can go forever without eating because I forget, because I just don't even really feel hungry, you know, very often. I do everything fast. It drives me insane to be with people that do things slow. I drive fast. I do everything fast. That's right, in medical school. Dr. Horner does stuff in one speed, fast. And then, you know, I'll have, I mean, obviously I'm a professional speaker, so that's pitta. So it's like you have this intellect and you can, you know, speak well. And so you'll find these kind of different combinations of things. But what's important is that when you find out what your body constitution is, and there's tests that you can take online, and I actually have one in my book too, then it gives you a much more detailed kind of prescription about what you need to do to keep your body in balance. So usually kaphas, for instance, do you like to exercise?
I do.
Okay. Usually they don't, so you just want them to move. And you could say, okay, get out and run, do vigorous stuff. That's actually not good for a vata, but the natural tendency is I want to get out there and run and do all this kind of stuff. It's better for a vata to do more gentle kinds of activities. Usually vatas have a tendency towards dryness, so they need to add more oils, you know, to their system. And actually vata is the dosha that gets out of balance before all the other ones. So things like travel and doing things fast-paced will throw vata out of balance. And so what pacifies vata is actually some of the tastes that we have. So sweet and salty. What do we crave all the time, right? Sweet and salty, because we're trying to pacify our vata. Yeah. So anyway, so thank you, ladies. I really appreciate you. The volunteers, all right. So now, when I did my book on, you know, on breast cancer prevention, it actually won the best health book of the year when it came out. And so I actually have 3 editions to that. So the last edition I added 150 pages to it because we've had such an explosion of research in that area and our knowledge. Now, a couple of years ago, I decided to write the book that I was going to do originally, which is called Radiant Health Ageless Beauty. And it's a book about how to create extraordinary health and longevity. And really it's kind of frameworked in Ayurveda, because that's actually the whole point of Ayurveda, is teaching you how to create extraordinary health. And so what we recognize is that we have all these, we call them natural laws that govern us as human beings. And simply it's like, well, if you don't sleep, you're not going to do very well. If you don't eat, you're not going to do very well. But actually, Ayurveda understands hundreds of different recommendations where it's like, okay, you're in a human body. And so being in a human body, this is the way that we're wired. So these are the following things that you need to do. This is the timing of these things. These are the shifts that you need to do during the seasons. And based on your body types, then we can tell you specifically like what fruits and vegetables are the best for you, which ones you should avoid, which ones you should favor, which ones you should avoid to bring your body best into balance. So now when I started looking into the research of longevity and just creating kind of extraordinary health, one of the questions that really comes up, and it has for the last 100, 150 years, that people question, why do we age? It's like, well, we don't have to age, right? But like, why do we age? And so they've actually come up with 300 different theories of aging. And you think, okay, well, when you look at them, what happens is like one of them right or whatever? Well, it turns out that they're all right. So there's many different processes that go into causing our aging. And so to kind of wrap our minds around it, they've actually been put into about 5 or 6 different categories for us to understand. But basically, some of the concepts are that, we have this biological clock, basically. And we can see that that's true for a certain extent when we look at the animal world. It's like, you have dogs. It's like, well, certain breeds, are going to live to be 12 years. Some breeds will live to be 20 years. A tortoise, in the Galapagos Islands might live to be 200 years, the human lifespan. So we know that there is something about where we have these expected lengths of life. Then there's theories about kind of wear and tear that happens to our body. So there's damage that's occurring all the time from oxygen-free radicals and toxins and inflammation and so forth. And so finally that damage kind of does too much to us. And so that's the thing that causes us to break down. Then there's a theory of aging that we definitely have done a lot of research on, where we've recognized on the end of our chromosomes that there's little segments called telomeres. And these telomeres are things where, if you remember from your high school biology, the chromosomes will line up in the middle of the cells, make replicas of themselves, and that's how the body kind of rejuvenates itself. With each cell division, what happens is that telomere gets shorter. And so we've absolutely been shown that the telomere length definitely is associated with lifespan. And they'll see like twin studies. They'll find like a twin, let's say a twin like smoked and stayed up late at night and did all sorts of stuff. They'll find that their telomeres are much shorter than the other twin, and guess what? They die before the other twin does. Now with the telomeres, the interesting thing is that most of the stuff that we know that's bad for us will shorten your telomeres. So things like stress. We find that people that go through extreme stress, that they have, suddenly their telomeres will become a lot shorter. Eating junk foods and so forth, well, that, will shorten them. And staying up too late at night will, shorten them. And so the things that we know that are good for us, such as exercising, for instance, lengthens telomeres. And you've seen these people that are just in great shape their whole lives, and they might be, there's people that run marathons when they're in their 80s and their 90s, and they don't look like the normal population. And so metabolically, what we find is that they actually have all sorts of changes that are youthful. And so exercise, we used to think of it as just being for cardiovascular health, but then what we found is that when we exercise, there's all sorts of hormones that are released and proteins and so forth that have these extreme rejuvenating effects on our physiologies and lengthening the telomeres. Meditation. So stress is one of the major problems as far as increasing our risk of all sorts of different kinds of chronic diseases. The National Institute of Health has said that 90% of all illnesses, from mental to physical, that stress plays a huge role in it. And so what do we do about that? Well, in ancient cultures, like in traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurveda, it was recognized thousands of years ago that stress had this huge contribution to shortening lifespans and increasing your risk of disease. And so they taught what we call effective stress-reducing techniques. So in Ayurveda, meditation is definitely one of them. And then in traditional Chinese medicine, we knew like Tai Chi and Qigong and so forth are used. Now, the amazing thing is that what these techniques do is that they train your nervous system to not be as responsive to any kind of stressful situations. So you can have the same stresses that used to stress you out terribly, and you can have these same stresses, and what happens is you just don't react to them like you normally do, and you don't get the same physiology, so your stress hormones don't get elevated as much and so forth. So they've done amazing studies, and transcendental meditation is actually the most researched form of meditation. There's over 600 published studies on it, and there was a study that was done in Canada where they took people who practiced transcendental meditation twice a day, it's just 20 minutes twice a day, for 5 years or longer. Then they took a comparative group of people that did not meditate, and they found that the people that practiced transcendental meditation were admitted to the hospital half of what the other folks were, that for every single diagnosis, including accidents, except for pregnancies. So this simple mental technique, I mean, it seems amazing that it can have this profound effect, kind of overall global effect on our body, but it tells us really about how much stress really influences our health. So, to me, it's kind of like no longer negotiable. I mean, it's kind of like you absolutely have to be practicing some form of an effective stress-reducing technique like every day in order to have optimal health, because we're constantly being bombarded by stress. So when I was working as a surgeon, the thing that I really noticed, particularly with my breast cancer patients, is that in almost every single incidence of it, I'd ask them, okay, did you have anything particularly stressful happen to you, in the last few years? And it's pretty much 100% yes. So we can do all these things that kind of bring our bodies out of balance, and our bodies are still working to try to keep, kind of our homeostasis. But boy, if you get slugged with some extreme stress, I mean, it just takes you out. I mean, your immune system is just annihilated when you go through stress. And so that's, to me, it's like super, super important to be practicing one of these techniques, because it's the only way that you can really kind of protect yourself from the devastating effects of stress. Now, sleep. So, why do we sleep? Well, one of the things that's really interesting in Ayurveda is they say, okay, there's these different segments of time during the day. So they divide them up. So from like 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. is kapha time. From 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. is pitta time. And from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. is vata time. So because of that, you'll notice that during those time periods, your body is actually kind of energetically different. The best time for us to eat our main meal is noontime, like lunchtime. And here in the United States, what do? We do heavy meals at nighttime. So according to Ayurveda, our digestive fires are the highest during noontime. Now, there's a really interesting study that was just published recently that actually looked at this when people timed their meals to eat their main meals. And they found that when people timed their meals to be the largest at around the noontime or lunchtime, and then just did light breakfasts or light dinners, that they actually, even though they consumed the same amount of calories as the other group, they lost weight. And this is considered like the best time, as I said, for your digestion. And then for dinner time, you're supposed to just do really light, like soups, easily digestible, and to do it early. So you really shouldn't eat anything after 7 o'clock. If you eat too heavy of these meals, then what happens is that you're digesting when you should be sleeping. And you get disturbed sleep. I think everybody has had the experience where you eat like the Thanksgiving meal or something like that, and maybe you have wild nightmares during the night, or you're tossing and turning and so forth. So it really is something that, interferes with your sleep. So, so looking at the timing of all of this, Ayurveda says, okay, the optimal times for us to sleep is to go to bed before 10 o'clock and to get up before 6 o'clock. Those are the optimal hours. Well, guess what? The researchers found is that that's absolutely true. And it has to do with these hormonal fluctuations that we have throughout the day and throughout the night. So if you look at kind of normal fluctuations, you'll find our cortisol levels, kind of come up in the morning and come down. We have, and as I'm talking about hormones, it's just not like estrogen and progesterone and testosterone, but things like insulin, which is the hormone that helps to facilitate getting glucose into our cells, our sleep hormone, melatonin, which also is a very important hormone that helps with our immune system. It regulates estrogen in the body. And so all of these different hormones are interacting with each other, but they have these different kinds of fluctuations. So if you go to bed before 10 o'clock, those hormonal fluctuations are found to be optimal. If you go to bed after 10 o'clock, they're not. And in fact, they found that people who stay up to midnight on a regular basis, that their hormonal fluctuations are so screwed up that their risk of heart disease, diabetes, obesity, and certain cancers like breast cancer, prostate cancer, colon cancer, almost doubles. If you're trying to lose weight and you're thinking, why can't I lose weight? Because you stay up too late at night. Because what happens is like your cells know it's time to sleep. We are like totally hooked into the circadian rhythms of the earth. Your cells know it's time to sleep. Now, normally, once you hit 10 o'clock, you usually start to get hungry again. Why is that? Well, it's pitta time again, 10 to 2. That's 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. So during that time, Ayurveda says your body needs to be detoxifying. So pitta is working to get all these, toxins and flushing them out, but you're still up, and so your body's not detoxifying like it should, and instead you're feeling hungry. So you go and snack. Well, guess what? Your cells are asleep. So those calories come in, and your cells are like, we're asleep. We're doing our work to try to detoxify. They get insulin resistant, which increases your risk of diabetes as well as most other chronic diseases. And all of those calories go to your favorite place. Yeah, so it's almost impossible to do effective weight loss if you're staying up, too late. So what Ayurveda says is that you should back your bedtime up 15 minutes every week to kind of gradually train yourself to go to bed early. So once you start going to bed before 10 o'clock and getting up by 6 o'clock, your little inner healing intelligence is so happy that if you've had symptoms of imbalances, so for instance, I work with women who have menopausal symptoms, and I'll go through their whole diet and lifestyle, and it's like, okay, what's the main offense that you're doing that your body's not happy about? And it'll be, they're staying up too late. So they start going to bed before 10 o'clock, and guess what? Their hot flashes go away because you're inducing balance into your body. So all of the symptoms that we have is your inner healing intelligence talking to you saying, hey, I don't like what you're doing. And we just go around and go, did I hear something? Nah, I just keep doing what you're doing. And then all of a sudden it's just like, hey, I really don't like what you're doing. And what are you doing? La, 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 la. And you keep doing your stuff. And then she starts screaming at you, hey, I hate what you're doing. Well, that's when you get hot flashes and mood swings and, peptic ulcer kind of stuff and GI distress. And instead of us, what do? We run to the doctor, we go on hormones or we take some medication instead of going, what don't you like that I'm doing? And when you make these little corrections, then all of a sudden your body goes into balance and all those symptoms go away. And amazing thing about Ayurveda too is that there's so many little simple things that you can do that have a profound effect on the body. So like I said, going to bed before 10 o'clock, eating your main meal at noontime, huge, differences when you do that. Here's another one that's fairly amazing. So iced drinks, how we like to do iced drinks here with our meals. So our digestive enzymes in our stomach, the ideal temperature for them to function is body temperature. So when you douse those fires and those digestive enzymes with ice, then they cut their function by 50%. So you're not digesting, very well. So an old Ayurvedic thing says take sips of hot water, warm water, every 15, 20 minutes throughout the day. So all you're doing is just taking a few sips like that. What it does is it helps to kind of open up all the channels in your body. It causes your digestive tract to always be doing some peristalsis to kind of clean it out. And people, this simple thing, here, all the sophisticated stuff we do in Western medicine, right? Drinking sips of hot water throughout the day. It can cause you to go into this amazing detoxification. Your skin looks incredible. People have lost like 10 pounds in very short order and so forth because you're flushing through the system and keeping, things flowing through the digestive system. So like I said, little simple things, but just these incredible, profound effects that it has on the human body. Now, another thing that's extremely important is to do detoxification. And this has been an area where there's a lot of controversy. Oh, you don't need to do that. The body detoxifies itself anyway, blah, blah, blah. Well, Ayurveda 5,000 years ago said we should be detoxifying because we get these toxins in our body. Now, 5,000 years ago, did we have all the chemicals that we have right now? Heck no. But even having emotional upsets and eating when you're emotionally upset causes you not to digest your food as well as you should. Then those particles are things that get clogged into your system, and then you don't have that flow of that intelligence through your system. So they created a detoxification program called Pancha Karma. So Pancha means 5, Karma means actions. And basically, it's luxurious spa treatment. So it may sound like it would be uncomfortable or painful, but not at all. You go into a kind of a medical spa type setting. They're doing lots of hot oils and massage and steam treatments and even colonics and so forth. So when I learned Transcendental Meditation, the gentleman who introduced me to it, he said, if you want to learn more about Ayurveda, which this is from, you should go to this clinic in Fairfield, Iowa, where they have a kind of a premier Panchakarma clinic, and experience Panchakarma. So I'm like, okay, I'll go do that. So I signed up for a 3-day, which is nothing. I've gone for weeks at a time, but a 3-day session when I first went there. So after 48 hours, I looked in the mirror and I looked 10 years younger and I never felt better in my life. And I thought, holy cow, these people really know something. So I studied Ayurveda like crazy. So I'm now certified in Ayurveda. And I thought, what we tell our patients, again, we don't teach about health. And it's like there's so many simple things that people can do. So I thought, all right, I went to the television stations in Cincinnati and I said, hey, let me be your doctor on air speaking about complementary and alternative medicine techniques. This is back in 1999, before Dr. Oz. So they went for it. So I did that for 3 years. And in order to pull this off, of course, I felt like this was my residency in natural medicine because I made sure that everything was, evidence-based and so forth. But, and I was now working 14 hours a day, 7 days a week to pull off doing that with my practice and kept that up for 3 years. And then woke up one morning and went, I can't do this anymore. So I quit my practice then. And I decided that I was going to dedicate myself to teaching people how to avoid the knife, because to me I can do so much better work in the world and affect so many more humans to help them with their health when there's, like I said, simple things that you can do. So that's what I do now, is I travel over the country doing television mostly and radio and then writing books. So the detoxification program You know, the amazing thing about it, now they've done research on everything, so I just find that, you know, wonderful about Ayurveda. So we're, you know, confirming, so everything, all the principles that we learned from 5,000 years ago, research is showing not only does it work, but it works a heck of a lot better than we ever thought, you know, it would. So in high school biology, again, we learn about semi-permeable membranes, which is what our body's cells are made out of. So when we get toxins in our bodies, they actually concentrate and store in our fat cells. So there was a study that was done where they did blood levels of DDT, you know, a pesticide that we know increases the risk of breast cancer as well as other things. And they then did biopsies of the fat, and they found that in the fat, the concentration of DDT was 700 times greater. So this is a phenomenon called bioconcentration. So anytime we get toxins in our body, they will concentrate and store in our fat cells. Now, some of these pesticides and so forth, I mean, they can take decades, you know, for them to get out of our body. So one of the things that Panchakarma is so effective at is getting these lipid-soluble toxins out of our body. So in theory, what happens is with these semi-permeable membranes is we have, you know, particles on one side of the membrane and lesser particles on another, and the natural thing is that you want to get the particles even is what happens. So there's all these other techniques that you do before you go in for Panchakarma where you're actually adding ghee or clarified butter to your diet and increasing amounts, so you're actually increasing lipid concentration in your body, and that helps to pull out these toxins from the fat. And so what they did was to take patients and have them before they went through Panchakarma, they measured their fat levels of toxins and did biopsies of them. They had them go through a 5-day series of Panchakarma treatments and then biopsy their fat again. And what did they find? There was a 50% reduction in the amount of toxins that were concentrated in their fat cells. So then they looked at people who did Panchakarma on a regular basis and who ate organic foods and did biopsies of their fat, and they found that they had so few toxins in their body they weren't even measurable. So it's something that really works. And of course, they've used it for things like people that have had toxic heavy lead exposures to, like in a stained glass factory. They've used it for Agent Orange, you know, patients, and had really astounding effects, mercury toxicities and that kind of thing. So it's actually really important for us to do some effective detoxification, to me, a couple times a year to make sure that we keep these, you know, toxins out of our system because we're exposed to them, you know, in our air and our water and, you know, all of our different products and so forth. So how much more time do I have? I just want to make sure I'm staying on task.
You have plenty of time, and you don't have to use all of it. It's fine.
Okay, all right, that's fine. Okay. So other things that aspects of health, you know, that we find. In fact, the thing that affects us more than anything else affects our health. Does anybody know what that could be? More than diet, more than smoking, more than genetics? Well, that's a good point as part of it because it's actually our emotions. Yes. Well, it's our emotions, actually, affect us more than anything else, and actually the specific emotion that has more of a predictive effect on our longevity and our health is feeling loved and supported. Number one thing. So we as human beings are wired to be in loving, supportive relationships. And there's all sorts of research that have shown that when people isolate themselves, that their risk of disease, you know, goes much, you know, higher up, and their longevity is, you know, significantly shortened. So working with my breast cancer patients, I mean, this is another really interesting phenomenon with the human body that's an area of a lot of research now, is looking at specific emotions and where they show up in our body. So we actually find things like when we're experiencing extreme grief, that the effects of that emotion affect the lungs kind of more than any other area. So you know when Christopher Reeve, you know, Superman died, and his wife died within a year, And she had never smoked a cigarette in her life, but she died of lung cancer. It was considered the cancer of grief. Now, with breast cancer, where are the breasts overlying? The heart. So when they do studies on women who have breast cancer and they're looking for commonalities, what could potentially be a commonality here, very commonly, these women will have broken hearts for a particular reason. Maybe they have a bad relationship. They've gone through a divorce. They lost a child. Something happened like that really affected their heart. Not living out your passions. That's actually something that they found that statistically influences very significantly your longevity. And so when you're not living out your passions, it affects your heart. And so you can actually, women who have breast cancer, the men that they're with have an inordinately high incidence of heart disease. So because they're, together. So when we look at our emotions, when I went through medical school and residency and everything, we didn't think emotions had anything to do with disease, right? Maybe those people that had peptic ulcer disease were a little stressed out, but other than that, forget it. I mean, we just didn't even think that. But now we're understanding that that is like the most significant influence on our life. And it's kind of one of the hardest ones. It's like, well, we can concentrate on foods and supplements and so forth, but, doing the emotional work, and there's all sorts of techniques that are amazing out now, understanding how our nervous system works, where we will get these trapped memories in our bodies, actually, not just in our brains. They go into our bodies. And so there's all these different techniques that can help to release these trapped memories there. So there's fascinating research that they found in people that get transplants, so like heart transplants in particular. So they'll find that somebody who gets a heart transplant, in many cases, they start adopting characteristics of the person who they got the heart from. So one of the freakiest ones they had, there was a little girl that got a heart transplant from another child. And she'd never seen the family from, where she got the heart transplant. And I think she was only 6 or 7 or something. And she's in a crowd of people, and she sees this man, and she goes running over to him and starts yelling, "Daddy, Daddy." It was the father of the little girl that donated the heart. Yeah, it's just like, holy cow. So this is showing us that we store these emotions and memories, within our bodies, and then just getting that there's actually lots of different techniques that are out there now that can do kind of instantaneous releases of these things. You don't have to be in therapy for 20 years. It's just like, instantaneous kinds of releases. So, to me, that's like another really important thing, and particularly if you end up getting an illness, it's like, why did I get this? What's the, happened here? What's the message that it's giving to me? And so it's kind of important, to do that work in order to really get, full healing from what your condition is. Now, I am going to hit just a few things as far as supplements. So when we looked at the number one thing, and the only thing that they've really done a lot of repeated studies on to find that can lengthen our lifespan, they found one thing, and a long time ago they found this, that will lengthen our lifespan. Anybody know what that is? Magnesium. Nope. So caloric restriction. So back in the 1920s or 30s, they did this experiment where they took mice, and they decided that they were going to really restrict, the calories, 30, 50% of some mice, and the other ones they were going to feed them, whatever they wanted. And they thought that what was going to happen was in the mice where they restricted their calories, they weren't going to be as healthy. But the opposite happened. They lived longer, all their blood factors were, better and everything. So it's like, okay, well, those are mice, but what happens if you, do it in like primates or human beings? So they did it in monkeys, same thing happened. Then we actually had a human experiment that happened. So back in the 1990s, there was something called the Biosphere 2 in the deserts of Arizona, where they put a big bubble up and they had people live within this community that was completely enclosed to see if we could live that way. They ate about 30 to 40% less calories. They grew their own food and everything. And so at the end of the 3 years that they were in there, they did all the testing on them, and they found that their telomeres had lengthened, their blood factors were like so much better, their longevity genes had been activated, and so forth. So it's like, okay, well, like how skinny do you have to be, for this? Like how restrictive? Well, we've actually found that there's certain things that can mimic the same effects that calorie restriction does. And one of them is resveratrol, which is found in grape skins. So it will have the same kind of metabolic effects and effects on your genes that calorie restriction does. And again, it's kind of important for us to not eat as much as we think we need to eat. Now, the other thing that really influences our health and our longevity, I'll pull these things out here. So one of the theories of aging too is that our system, so things like our nervous system, our immune system, kind of get weakened with age. And so we do see evidence, for that too. So there's mushrooms actually have been found to be the one food group that actually has the strongest effect on our immune system. And so in Japan, what they did was to do experiments, this was decades ago, with various different mushrooms, and even looking at specific mushrooms in the same species to find which ones would have the most effect on the immune system. And so they discovered a particular mushroom that's a type of shiitake mushroom that had the most powerful effect on the immune system. They've kept that mushroom like as the mother mushroom, where they make all the other mushrooms from it. And so this is a supplement out of Japan that's called AHCC, called active hexose correlated compound, which is why we call it AHCC. They've actually done hundreds of studies on it and shown that it supports every single cell type in our immune system. It actually does this thing called immunomodulation, which means that if your immune system is underactive, it makes it more active. If it's overactive, like we see in autoimmune diseases, it helps to quiet it down. So it does this kind of immunomodulation. Because it's so supportive of the immune system, they found that it actually lowers the risk of many different kinds of cancers, from prostate cancer, colon cancer, breast cancer, melanomas, liver cancers, and so forth. If you get cancer in Japan, they will treat you with this in the hospitals because the survival statistics are so much better, and it seems to take away the side effects of chemotherapy, too. So it really kind of quells that. Now, they did research on this at MD Anderson, and they found that it killed the HPV virus, which is responsible for cervical cancer and other types of cancers. Now, if you get the HPV virus, it goes away on its own 98% of the time. Like only 2% of people go on to have chronic infections with it. So it probably doesn't make sense to be doing vaccines that can kill you for that. So what they did is if a woman gets an HPV, chronic HPV infection, there is no effective Western treatment for it, other than they're doing topical stuff and surgery and so forth to take care of any abnormal cells. So what this researcher did was to put women with HPV infections on the AHCC, and what they found is that most of the women that stayed on it for 6 months cleared the HPV virus. It's the only thing that we know of that will eradicate it. So it should be extremely effective for cervical cancer. So they're doing big studies on it, right now, clinical studies to kind of confirm that data. So the next thing is, what we're discovering is that one of the major problems with disease and, shortening our longevity is being overweight. And as we know, this is an enormous problem now. And so, as we said, the statistics are 2/3 of people in the United States are overweight or obese. Well, now what they've discovered is that there's all these additional people that look like they would be normal weight. If you're looking at their BMI, which is kind of a rough measurement, it's called the body mass index, which is simply taking your weight and dividing it by your height. It doesn't look at what's happening with body composition. So then they analyzed and they found that actually 76% of the world's population is considered overfat. In the United States, 90% of men are considered overfat. Why is this a problem? Well, the biggest problem is if you have belly fat, and it's not the subcutaneous type of fat, but the fat that's on the inside. So we have fat that coats, some of our organs to try to protect it. But some people will get this deposition of fat there. The beer belly is kind of the quintessential look of the belly fat. The reason that that is so dangerous for us is because that fat versus the subcutaneous fat, belly fat is considered metabolically active. So what that means is producing hormones, is producing inflammatory proteins. If you have belly fat, you are in a pro-inflammatory state, just kind of by definition. They've actually discovered that even if you have a little bit, and like not a lot, that statistically your risk of 50 different chronic diseases increases in 11 different kinds of cancers. So that's why it's not that it's unsightly, but it's actually extremely damaging to our health. So of course, diabetes, heart disease, and breast cancer, prostate cancer, all these things are related to that too. So if you even lose 5% of your belly fat, they've actually found that it significantly improves your risk of developing those diseases. Now, of course, we know that there's no magic pill, for diminishing belly fat. But there's certain things that you can do. So as far as the things that we know that cause you to want to form belly fat, we know there's two things you can't do anything about. One is gender, so men have a tendency to get more than what women do. And the other is genetics, because some of us are pear-shaped, so you get the hips and thigh fat, which you don't like, but it doesn't really harm you. Or you have the apple shape, which means that you have a propensity for getting the belly fat. The things you can do something about is your diet. The number one thing that causes fat in the body and in the abdomen is sugar and carbs. Number one thing. I mean, sugar is like pure poison for us, hugely inflammatory, kills off your immune system, and then does this deposition of belly fat. So stress is the next thing. So when we are stressed out, which we generally all are all the time, we get cortisol levels that are chronically high, and those high cortisol levels cause belly fat. So the techniques to really help to kind of diminish the belly fat are targeted on those things. So for reducing stress, we talked about doing an effective stress reducing technique, which is very beneficial. But they found that plain old vitamin C, for instance, is something that helps to keep cortisol levels from staying chronically elevated. You can take it as a supplement, or you can favor foods that are high in vitamin C, which are like bell peppers and oranges and winter squash and kale and the cruciferous vegetables and so forth. The next thing is, like I said, there's no magic pill, but there is what's fascinating. I'm sure you all know this too. It's like when you look at any plant, what we find is that each plant has its own natural pharmacy in it, and some of them will have unique molecules in them. And when we study them, we find that they have very specific health effects. So it's called a polyphenol, and most of the active ingredients we find in plants are polyphenols, which means that they're high antioxidant and high anti-inflammatory properties to them. But there's a polyphenol called oligonol, and oligonol is found in the lychee fruits. So lychee fruits are from Asia, and they're these little white kind of fleshy fruits with a hard red covering to them. Super sweet. And a lot of times when you buy them here, they're in cans in heavy syrup, which you don't want to have. So what they did was they discovered oligonol. They kind of processed it into like a shorter polyphenol so it's more bioavailable. But when they looked at what are the specific effects of it, they found that it has very specific effects on belly fat. So what it does is it helps to prevent the deposition of it. If you have it, it helps for it to kind of, for that fat to be released. So they did this double-blinded placebo-controlled study on men who had abdominal girths greater than 33 inches, and they put half of them on the oligonol and half of them on a placebo. At the end of 10 weeks, they did CAT scans. I would not be in favor of that, but they were looking for the percentage of belly fat that was reduced. And what they found was there was a 15% reduction in belly fat in 10 weeks. I mean, that's like astronomically, significant. They also found that they lost about 6% of subcutaneous fat and about 1.5 inches off their waist. So, of course, nothing like, you have to do diet and exercise, with it, but this is, something that can actually help kind of metabolically for you. So, and then, I just kind of brought this too. This is a formula that I actually formulated about 15 years ago called Protective Breast Formula. And what I did was I looked at all the different plants that had the highest anti-cancer effects against breast cancer, but it's also prostate cancer, colon cancer, very similar tumors. Whatever lowers the risk of one does the same thing, for the other ones. They're all, very much diet and lifestyle related. So, so what I did was I thought, okay, how many can we put into one supplement? So it's easy for people to take and cost effective and so forth. So we chose 7 different supplements. So we took turmeric, the #1 anti-cancer spice, green tea, which has got, spectacular anti-cancer effects, vitamin D, a couple different things from cruciferous vegetables, the indole-3 carbinol, calcium D-glucarate, which helps to detoxify the body, and grapeseed extract, which has got some high antioxidant capabilities to it and also helps to diminish estrogen in the body. So we put all this into one tablet, and then what we did is we did the study on it looking at women who, we used thermography, which is an infrared picture of the breast. How many people are familiar with thermography? So it's just a camera, infrared camera, and what we've discovered is that when these cameras are things that can show us areas of inflammation in the body, so we can see heat and blood vessel patterns. So it's basically showing us the physiology. So when we're using it specifically for the breast area, one of the great designs that we have is before you have a tumor that forms, there's new blood vessels that start to grow into the area, but they're not normal. They grow in abnormal patterns and they produce an abnormal amount of heat. So you can see that first before you ever develop a tumor. Now, when you see people like that, it's just like, okay, let's start changing some things. So what I did was we identified those women, and then we put them on protective breast formula. And then we rescanned them at 8 to 12 weeks afterwards, and we found that in almost every single woman, we had almost complete reversals of those patterns. So it just shows us, first of all, the power of these plants, but also that we can interrupt the progression towards going to breast cancer. And you can use tools like thermography to actually kind of keep tabs on your health. So it's like, well, if you start to show more inflammation and everything, hey, you better stop eating that cake and start exercising a little bit more and going to bed earlier, and then boom, you'll see these changes. So for me, it's a great, tool for monitoring your health. So I'm going to go ahead and take any questions now. Yeah.
Mentioned a certain ultrasound that was better than, just a better form of ultrasound. Would you explain that to the audience, please?
Sure. So there's a technology called elastography ultrasound, and it was developed decades ago, and I don't understand why it's not in widespread use. But basically what this technology does is it has a color mode scale on it, and it's way more sophisticated now. They just came out with a new version of it that works in an even more sophisticated way, kind of looking at the flexibility of the cell membranes. So when you have cells that are sick or becoming cancerous, they're stiff. Normal cells are flexible. So you can put this mode on and you can actually see the difference between that. So with a normal ultrasound, you can just see a mass, whether it's cystic or solid, but with this one, you can determine, is that something to be concerned about or not? So I actually see, I have this done in a clinic in Tijuana The radiologist there was trained here in the United States. His equipment's made by General Electric. And so when I went to go see him years ago to begin with, he said, you know, I found a 1 millimeter tumor in this woman. You could never see that with a normal ultrasound or, you know, even with mammography, but it showed up as this, you know, little red thing. So I sent this person to a surgeon and said, I think she's got, you know, 1 millimeter tumor in there. And the surgeon's like, no way can you diagnose that with an ultrasound. Well, sure enough, that's what she had. So there are spots in the country where this is, but it's hard to find, yeah. But I just think it's an amazing technology, yeah.
What is it called again?
So it's called elastography ultrasound. So elastic, basically, elastography ultrasound, yeah.
Can you hear me? Yeah. You talked about Panchakarma Clinic in Fairfield, Ohio, Iowa. Sorry.
Yes.
And are there others in the country?
Oh,
Or is it
yeah,
just-
there's clinics all over the country. So there's more and more that have sprung up, and I'm sure you probably have one in, you know, in this area. But John Douliard is in Boulder, Colorado. He's, you know, extremely well known. Dr. Mishra is just north of Los Angeles. I mean, you'll find them scattered throughout the country.
And
so that,
those
yeah.
clinics are called Panchakarma?
Panchakarma.
Okay,
Yeah.
and they address all kinds of different...
Yeah, so in my book, actually what I did with my book is in the back of it, I have a reference section that's where I have listed all the different things I talk about. So you know where they are, you know, who to find, how to contact them, yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Your supplement, the little one. the
Wait,
leaching
she wants to give you the microphone, yeah.
I have a question on
Yes,
the little bottle there.
Yes,
Was
Yeah,
the
oligonol.
lychee.
Oligonol,
Why it says on it removes dark spots.
So it has a number of different things that it does, not just one. I talked about it in relationship
Belly
to belly fat, but it's also been found to help to protect against diabetes, and it's been shown to improve wrinkles and dark spots on your skin.
Can you explain that more?
Well, a lot of it has to do, there's antioxidants and anti-inflammatories in it, but like I said, each particular active molecule in a plant has its own specific kind of natural medicines in it and specific actions, you know, with it. So those are the things that they found that it does so far. Yeah.
There was somebody over here who raised their hand. Okay.
Earlier on, you were talking about mushrooms helping,
Yes.
and then you said ACC did the same thing. Was that made from mushrooms?
Yeah, so AHCC,
AACC.
AHCC, active hexose correlated compound, it's you know, out of Japan. It is made from several different subspecies of shiitake mushrooms, and they actually extract it from the roots of it, the mycelium, not the cap of it. So it's like smaller molecules that are more easily absorbed into the system. But yeah, this is
Thank
the
you.
one, yeah.
I just wanted to go back to the lychee. This is very popular in India. The studies that you indicated, were they done on people eating the fruits or concentrate of their juice or
No.
the chemical that's derived from that?
Exactly. So they were done on this supplement. So it was done on oligonol. Because you can't, so the molecule of oligonol is actually a different molecule in the lychee, and they bring it out and process it, so they turn it into a shorter polyphenol that's more bioavailable and easily absorbed. So they said you'd have to eat like 20 lychee fruits in order to get the dose, and that's like way the heck too much sugar to consume.
Is this manufactured by drug company or Ayurvedic
No, this
medicine?
is actually a Japanese company too.
Okay,
yeah.
they make it as a chemical.
As the plant chemical oligonol. They extract it from the
Thank you.
lychee fruits, and then, yeah.
Hi, I also have a question about one of the supplements for the breast health. So the study that you were referring to was with your own patient that you sort of saw.
So it wasn't my own patients. We used thermography patients. So I had
Thermography
several
patients, okay.
different thermographers that were finding women that had these early warning signs but did not have breast cancer. Yeah.
So, but my question is that, so they were just given the supplements and then the inflammation was going down?
So they were given the
so
supplement.
that pill was,
And then we also coached them on diet and lifestyle, but you never know what people are going to do, right, with that. So, but it was a supplement.
oh yeah, because I mean,
Yeah.
I thought how a pill can be a kind of an answer of reducing inflammation seems a bit...
Oh, it's spectacular.
You just
So
mentioned that there's all these other ways.
Well, there's 7 different supplements
Yeah.
into one tablet. So we'll find things like turmeric, for instance. It inhibits the growth of 11 different kinds of cancers. I'm sorry, 17 different kinds of cancers they found so far. Green tea, like 11 different kinds of cancers. If you combine them together, there was a study that showed that when you combine 2 healthy things, you get synergistic reactions with them. So they found that the anti-cancer effects of green tea, they actually enhanced turmeric by 3 times, and turmeric enhanced the anti-cancer effects of green tea by 8 times. So you get these hugely synergistic effects with it, and it really does have amazingly profound effects on the body. So I'll tell this wild story too. So when I was first learning about all this in relationship to breast cancer, I read research from Lillian Thompson, who's at the University of Toronto, and she's the world-leading expert in flax seeds. And so she had reported this study where they took women who were diagnosed with breast cancer. She put them on 3 to 4 tablespoons of flaxseed a day. 3 weeks later, they took their tumors out. And every single patient, their tumors had shrunk in 3 weeks. My business manager's mom got breast cancer. I thought, well, I'll put her on flax seeds. And I also put her on a very potent Ayurvedic kind of herbal preparation that is very high in antioxidants. 3 weeks later, we do her surgery, and we take her tumor out, and we found that it had shrunk by 2/3 in 3 weeks. That's how powerful some of these foods are, for us. So again, I mean, we have extreme gifts, I think, in nature and we have just tremendous research. There's 10,000 studies in the medical research on turmeric, 10,000. Double-blind, placebo-controlled. We have excellent research on these plants and the various different plant chemicals in them so that we have very sophisticated understandings on how they work, and they're really testing everything kind of genetically to see what genes are being activated, which ones are being turned on, which ones are being turned off, so that we have this, fairly sophisticated understanding on how they work. So, yeah.
But my question was, I was trying to understand the power of supplements.
Uh-huh.
So does it mean that someone who just goes and eats fast food can just take that supplement? and
No,
have
of
the
course
same-
not.
So it requires a drastic change of lifestyle, right?
Yes. Uh-huh.
So that's probably what also make a difference.
Well,
not
there's,
just, right?
there's a lot of combinations
Okay.
of things, that can happen. But yeah, I mean, if somebody makes drastic changes in their lifestyle, they
Yeah.
usually, get, tremendously better. But we definitely know that there's certain, superfoods, we'll call them, or, various different plant, medicines that we have that have tremendous effects. They're not small. Green tea, they found that people who drink green tea on a daily basis, they have a 68% reduction in gastrointestinal cancers. I mean, it's not small. And actually, everything I found that had the statistically significant influence in lowering your risk of developing breast cancer, almost across the board, it was a 50% reduction. I mean, it's not small. It's like really astounding. Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, right here. I was just
Okay.
curious if you ground the flaxseed, or if you just ate it whole seed.
No,
Like,
if you ate a whole seed, you would just poop them out.
That's yeah. I
Good
was
roughage.
curious.
No,
So
you
ground
have to grind flax seeds, like really grind them into a really super fine powder, so that you can absorb
Yeah, I was just making
them.
sure.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
One more here, let's see. Maybe we'll do 2 more, and then anybody else who has a question, you could just come up and talk
Okay.
at the break.
So this is not directed towards breast cancer, but if a person had melanoma, do you have any tips that you might recommend or suggest?
Well, melanoma is kind of a funny tumor, but they've actually found things like sesame oil. So topical sesame oil helps to reduce, melanoma cells. HCC obviously, improves the immune system. They're coming out with amazing vaccines now, that are having tremendous effects.
Well, if they just removed it surgically, but you didn't do chemo or radiation?
So I'm so impressed with what they're doing with the kind of working with the immune system and the treatment of melanoma in particular. I mean, they're having like astounding results where they've had, people just riddled with it and that it has, an incredible response where they're just kind of melting away. So they just came out with a vaccine where they do it very tumor specific. And I think they were reporting on this just a couple of weeks ago where they were just getting phenomenal responses.
That's a vaccine. What if you've already had it?
If you've already had it?
Right.
Well, the main thing is to keep yourself as healthy as you possibly can because it's all about keeping your immune system as healthy as you can. So, to me, it's like learning every element that you need to do to have extraordinary health, and then doing everything that you need to do, to, as I said, to keep your immune system really healthy. And I take HCC every day. When I first started taking it about 5 years ago, I was not sick for 4 years. And I used to always I fly constantly, so I would get, a couple colds a year, and I didn't get sick at all, with it. So I became an evangelist. Yeah.
Is there anything people need to know about freshly grinding flaxseed versus grinding it in advance?
So it's really important to grind it fresh because it's high in omega-3 fatty acids, which go rancid very rapidly, and it's got a lot of kind of nutrients in it that are aromatic too. So it actually starts to break down right away. So you need to grind it fresh. Yeah, always. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So please, one more hand here for
Thank you.
Dr. Norris.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. And you'll be around for a little while so people can come ask questions. Like that. Okay, great. All right. Just want to make one announcement before we break for our food here. But I want to say February 15th is our next meeting. We'll have Catherine Reed, PhD. Her talk is entitled Unblind My Mind. And our second speaker is Jeanette Smith, who is speaking on aromatherapy. And after the break, we have Andy, who's right here in the back of the room, who will be speaking on natural, actually, believe his experience of healing himself. And